That morning began like many other important days in Bryn's life. The sky was clear, and soft sunlight streamed through the window of the small apartment where she was temporarily staying near the university. The air of early summer carried the familiar excitement of graduation season. Across the campus, students in black gowns and graduation caps moved about busily, taking photos with friends and family. Laughter, the clicking of cameras, and warm congratulatory hugs filled the atmosphere with joy. For Bryn, that day was supposed to be one of the happiest days of her life. After 4 years of hard study, countless late nights, finishing essays, and many stressful exams, she was finally about to receive her degree. It was not only the result of her academic journey, but also a symbol of her perseverance and determination throughout her years at university. Bryn stood in front of the mirror in her room, adjusting her graduation gown. Her hair was neatly tied back, and her makeup was light, but her eyes clearly showed a hint of nervous excitement. She had imagined this day many times before. In her mind, her parents would be sitting among the audience, smiling proudly as they watched her walk across the stage to receive her diploma. After the ceremony, the whole family would take photos together, maybe go out for dinner to celebrate, and talk about the future ahead. That was the picture Bryn had carried in her heart for many years. Before leaving the room, she checked her phone one more time. There were no new messages from her parents. It made her a little uneasy, but she quickly reassured herself that they were probably on their way. The ceremony still had a little time before it started. By the time Bryn arrived at the graduation venue, the place was already crowded. Families gathered together taking photos with their children. Many parents brought flowers, balloons, or congratulatory signs. Some even wore shirts printed with their child's name. Seeing those scenes made Bryn feel happy for her friends, while also quietly hoping that her own parents would appear soon. One by one, Bryn's friends found her in the crowd. They hugged, laughed, and talked about their plans after graduation. Some were preparing to move to other cities for work, while others planned to continue their studies in graduate school. Everyone carried a mixture of excitement and nervous anticipation. One of Bryn's friends asked her, "Have your parents arrived yet?" Bryn smiled softly and replied, "They're probably on their way." She said it calmly, but inside, a small, uneasy feeling lingered. Time passed faster than Bryn expected. The students were soon directed to their assigned seating areas by department. When Bryn found her seat, she turned to look toward the audience section. Hundreds of chairs were already filled with families. Many people were waving to their children, while others held up their phones to record videos. Bryn carefully scanned each row of seats. She tried to find the familiar face of her father or mother somewhere in the crowd, but she couldn't see them. At that moment, Bryn still believed they might simply be running late. Maybe they were looking for parking or standing in line to enter the audience area. She told herself everything was probably fine. The ceremony began with a speech from the university president. His voice echoed through the large speaker system as he spoke about the achievements of that year's graduating class, the wide future ahead of them, and the opportunities waiting beyond the university. The students around Bryn listened attentively, occasionally clapping in agreement. But Bryn only heard fragments of the speech. Her eyes kept drifting back toward the audience. She was still searching. She looked across each section of seats, hoping to see her parents walking in late and waving to catch her attention. But every time she looked again, they still weren't there. The ceremony continued with the presentation of diplomas. Groups of students were called one by one to walk across the stage. Each time a name was announced, that student's family usually erupted in cheers or loud applause. The hall was filled with pride and emotion. When it was time for Bryn's department, her heart began to beat faster. She stood up with her classmates and lined up, waiting for her turn. Even though she tried to stay calm, a small part of her still hoped her parents might appear at the last minute. But when Bryn's name was finally called, nothing had changed. She walked across the stage to the general applause of the audience, but there were no familiar cheers from her family. The moment passed quickly. Bryn shook hands with the university president, received her diploma, and smiled for the school's official camera. Everything she did followed the ceremony exactly as expected, but deep inside, she felt a huge emptiness. When she returned to her seat, Bryn looked toward the audience one more time. She knew the chances of her parents showing up now were almost gone, yet she still couldn't stop herself from hoping. After the ceremony ended, students poured out into the outdoor area to meet their families and take photos. Everywhere there were hugs, bouquets of flowers, and voices filled with congratulations. Bryn stood in the middle of that crowd. She watched her friends run into their parents' arms, smiling brightly in family photos. Some of them were even crying with emotion. But Bryn stood there alone in her graduation gown. Finally, she took out her phone and checked her messages again. There was still nothing from her parents. A few minutes later, her phone suddenly vibrated. A new message appeared. It was from her mother. Bryn opened the message with a mix of hope and nervousness. But as she read the words, her heart sank. The message said that her parents were very sorry they couldn't attend her graduation ceremony. They were currently at her sister Kendra's engagement party, and everything had happened very suddenly. They promised that the whole family would celebrate with her another time. Bryn stood still for a few seconds after finishing the message. Around her, people were still laughing, talking, and taking photos. The joyful atmosphere of graduation day filled the air. But for Bryn, that moment became a completely different memory. It was the moment she realized that the most important day of her college life had passed, without her family by her side. 7 years had passed since the day Bryn walked across the stage to receive her diploma in a hall where the seats meant for her parents remained empty. That moment had become a clear dividing line between her past and her future. At first, the pain made her feel completely abandoned, but over time, it slowly transformed into a powerful source of motivation. Bryn decided that if her family didn't value her achievements, she would build a life that she herself could be proud of. The years after graduation were not easy. Even though she had a full scholarship, Bryn still had to work part-time to cover many other living expenses. She continued the habit of working hard that she had developed since high school. During the day, she studied in lecture halls. At night, she worked, sometimes sleeping only a few hours. There were times when she felt completely exhausted, but whenever she remembered the image of the empty seat at her graduation ceremony, she reminded herself that she could not stop. Gradually, Bryn's efforts began to pay off. After graduating from university with excellent results, she found a job at a fast-growing technology company. At first, it was just an entry-level position. But thanks to her persistence and real ability, she quickly caught people's attention. Bryn was not the type who liked to brag, but she always completed her work far beyond expectations. She learned quickly, willingly took on additional responsibilities, and never hesitated to work long hours. Within just a few years, Bryn's career advanced rapidly. From an ordinary employee, she was promoted to project manager. Her income increased significantly, and her life gradually became more stable. Finally, as she approached her 30th birthday, she was able to buy herself a penthouse in the center of the city. It wasn't just a luxurious home. For Bryn, it was a symbol of all the effort and sacrifice she had made over the years. Throughout that time, Bryn's relationship with her family almost didn't exist. Occasionally, her mother sent short messages during holidays, but they always felt formal and distant. There were no long phone calls, no genuine interest. Bryn also never took the initiative to reach out. She no longer expected recognition from them. Everything changed one evening when Bryn posted a photo on Instagram. It was a picture of the living room in her newly purchased penthouse. Large glass windows overlooking the entire city, with the bright glow of city lights stretching out below. She posted the photo simply to share a personal milestone. But she never expected that the picture would open a new chapter in her story with her family. Just a few hours after the photo was posted, Bryn's phone vibrated. A message from her mother appeared after months of silence. The content surprised and confused her at the same time. Her mother called her "my dear daughter," asked about her life, and said she was very proud of her success. For Bryn, this sudden change felt strange. For many years, her mother had barely shown interest in her life. But after seeing the penthouse on social media, her attitude seemed to shift completely. At first, Bryn felt suspicious. Still, she replied politely, keeping some distance but not sounding cold. Over the next few days, her mother kept sending messages and calling. She said the whole family missed Bryn and wanted to see her again. She even suggested organizing a family dinner to make up for the lost years. That proposal made Bryn think deeply. Part of her still longed for her family's recognition, but another part felt that this concern had come far too late. In the end, Bryn agreed to attend the dinner. But she wasn't going there simply to reunite. Over the past 7 years, she had carried many memories and many unanswered questions. This time, she wanted to face them all. That evening, Bryn drove to the restaurant where her family had reserved a table. When she stepped into the private dining room, she saw her mother, father, and her sister Kendra already sitting there. The atmosphere at first felt awkward. Her mother stood up and hugged her tightly, as if they had always been close over the years. She kept saying how wonderful Bryn looked and how proud she was of everything her daughter had achieved. But to Bryn, those words sounded somewhat hollow. In her mind, the memories of years ago still lingered, times when her achievements had been ignored or dismissed. Dinner began with polite small talk. Bryn's mother asked about her job, about the penthouse, and about her life in the city. Her father spoke less but still tried to appear friendly. Kendra joined the conversation as well, though an unspoken distance still lingered between the two sisters. Bryn listened to everything but didn't say much. She knew the important moment hadn't come yet. Inside her handbag was a brown envelope, something she had prepared in advance. After everyone finished eating and the conversation began to quiet down, Bryn placed the envelope on the table. The simple action made the entire room fall silent. Her mother looked at the envelope with curiosity and asked what it was. Bryn took a deep breath before answering. She said that inside the envelope was something she had kept for many years. It was related to her graduation day, the day her parents had not shown up. Her mother immediately looked uncomfortable. She said that happened a long time ago and that everyone should focus on the present. But Bryn didn't want to ignore it anymore. For her, this dinner couldn't just be a cheerful reunion built on pretending everything was fine. She opened the envelope and took out several sheets of paper. They were printed copies of old messages, event schedules, and other details proving that her family had known about her graduation ceremony months in advance. They hadn't forgotten, and it wasn't that they couldn't come. They had simply chosen not to. Bryn calmly explained everything. She said that for 7 years she had wondered why she had never seemed important enough, but after looking back at everything, she realized the problem wasn't her. The problem was how her family had always prioritized Kendra. The atmosphere in the room quickly became tense. Her mother tried to justify it, saying that Kendra had been going through an important time with her engagement back then, but Bryn simply shook her head. She said a family could support 2 children at the same time, but they hadn't done that. What surprised everyone most wasn't the papers in the envelope, but Bryn's calmness. She wasn't shouting. She wasn't crying. She was simply stating the truth, clearly and steadily. Bryn explained that she hadn't brought the envelope to take revenge. Over the past 7 years, she had built her own life and no longer depended on her family's approval. But she wanted them to understand that their choices had consequences. She also said that their sudden interest after seeing the penthouse made her uncomfortable. If her family had truly cared, they would have shown it years ago. Her words left the room silent for a long time. For the first time, Bryn felt that the truth had finally been spoken. No more hiding, no more pretending everything was fine. For her, this moment wasn't a victory over her family. It was freedom. She had carried the pain of that graduation day for 7 years, and now she had finally set it down. The dinner ended in a heavy atmosphere. But when Bryn left the restaurant and stepped outside, she felt lighter than she had in years. Her success was no longer a way to prove something to her family. It was simply the result of her perseverance and self-respect. And for the first time in many years, Bryn realized she didn't need their acceptance to know her true worth. After Bryn placed the envelope on the table and said the things she had kept inside her heart for 7 years, the atmosphere in the dining room became so heavy it almost felt tangible. The polite small talk was gone. The exaggerated compliments about her penthouse and successful career had disappeared as well. Instead, there was a long silence, as each member of the family tried to process what had just happened. Bryn's mother was the first to break it. She sighed and said Bryn was making the situation far more serious than it needed to be. According to her, a graduation ceremony was just one day in a lifetime, while family was what truly mattered. She tried to argue that everyone makes mistakes and that Bryn holding on to the incident for 7 years was unnecessary. But Bryn wasn't convinced. She had heard too many explanations throughout her life. This time, she wanted the truth, not excuses. Calmly, she replied that the issue wasn't just one day. It was a long pattern of events over many years, where every achievement of hers had been minimized, while everything related to Kendra had always been placed first. Bryn's father, who had been mostly quiet since the beginning of dinner, finally spoke. He said Bryn was looking at things too negatively. In his view, parents simply try to support whichever child needs more help at a particular time. He explained that Kendra had always needed more attention because she struggled more in life. Bryn listened and then gently shook her head. She said she understood the idea of supporting the child who needed help most, but in their family, that idea had become an excuse to completely overlook her efforts. She began recalling different moments from the past. School award ceremonies her parents never attended, academic competitions they forgot about, and finally, the graduation ceremony, the biggest milestone of her entire education. Each time she mentioned another event, the silence in the room grew deeper. No one truly denied what she was saying, but no one was willing to fully admit it either. Kendra, Bryn's older sister, began to show clear irritation. She said Bryn was turning her into the villain of the story. According to Kendra, she had never asked their parents to skip Bryn's graduation. The engagement party being scheduled on the same day had simply been a coincidence. Bryn looked at her sister for a long moment before answering. She said she knew Kendra had not directly forced their parents to make that choice, but that didn't change the outcome. Their parents had been given a choice, and they had chosen Kendra's party over her graduation. Then Bryn said something that surprised everyone at the table. She had never been jealous of Kendra. For years, people had always assumed that because Bryn was the more successful and more independent one, she didn't need as much attention. But that didn't mean she didn't need her family. She explained that when she was younger, she had worked extremely hard at school, partly because she hoped it would make her parents proud. But every time she achieved something, their reaction was always mild and distant. Meanwhile, whenever Kendra did even something small, the whole family celebrated. Those words made Bryn's mother visibly uncomfortable. She insisted that Bryn was rewriting history and claimed the family had always loved both daughters equally. Bryn didn't argue angrily. Instead, she quietly opened her phone and showed them several old photos. They were pictures from many of Kendra's events, birthdays, her engagement celebration, family parties. In most of the photos, their parents were there, smiling brightly. Then Bryn showed them another photo. It was from her own graduation ceremony. In the picture, Bryn stood among her classmates. Everyone around her was holding flowers and taking pictures with their families. Only Bryn stood alone. That photo said more than any explanation could. Her father stared at it for a long moment before letting out a quiet sigh. He admitted that at the time he hadn't realized how much that day meant to her. He said that maybe they had underestimated how important the moment was. It was the first time that evening someone in the family had truly acknowledged a mistake, even if only partly. Her mother, however, still wasn't ready to fully accept it. She asked why Bryn hadn't spoken up earlier if she had been hurt so deeply. According to her, things might have been different if Bryn had clearly expressed her feelings. Bryn gave a small, quiet smile. She said that when she was younger, she had tried to speak up many times, but the responses she usually received were things like, "You're too sensitive," or "Don't make such a big deal out of it." So over time, she had learned to stay silent. That silence lasted for years until she left home and built a life of her own. Only after she had learned to stand firmly on her own did she feel confident enough to finally say everything. After a long and tense discussion, the atmosphere slowly softened. Everyone seemed to realize that this conversation couldn't be resolved with a simple apology. Bryn looked around the table and said she didn't expect her family to completely change or somehow go back in time to fix everything. That simply wasn't possible. But she wanted them to understand one thing. Her success was not an invitation for them to return to her life now that everything had become comfortable. For years, she had learned to live without their support. She had built her career, bought her home, and created a stable life entirely through her own effort. So if her family wanted a relationship with her in the future, it had to be based on genuine respect, not because she had become successful. Those words left the three of them thinking for a long time. Finally, Bryn's father spoke. He said he understood what she meant. He admitted that for many years he and Bryn's mother had been so focused on dealing with Kendra's problems that they had forgotten Bryn needed attention too. Kendra also began to soften. She said she had never realized how deeply everything had affected Bryn. For Bryn, those words didn't erase the past, but at least, for the first time in many years, she felt that her family was truly listening. When the dinner ended, Bryn didn't make any final decision about cutting off or fully restoring the relationship with her family. Instead, she said it would take time. Trust couldn't be rebuilt in a single evening. But she was willing to give them a chance not because she needed them, but because she wanted to see whether they were truly willing to change. When she left the restaurant, Bryn stepped out into the brightly lit streets of the city. For the first time in years, she felt a deep sense of calm. The conversation that night hadn't been perfect, and many things were still unresolved. But at least the truth had finally been spoken. And for the first time in many years, Bryn knew that her future with or without her family was completely in her own hands. After the tense evening at the restaurant, Bryn left with a mix of emotions. Although the conversation had allowed her to release the feelings she had carried for 7 years, it also reminded her that repairing a fractured family relationship was far from simple. As she drove back to her penthouse, she felt both relieved and strangely empty. The words, expressions, and reactions from each person at the dinner kept replaying in her mind. That night, Bryn barely slept. She sat on the sofa near the large glass windows overlooking the city. The lights from the tall buildings illuminated the night sky, creating a familiar view that still made her feel thoughtful. One question kept circling in her mind. Did her family truly understand what she had said, or had they simply been shocked in the moment? The next morning, Bryn's phone vibrated with a message from her father. It was short, but it carried a meaning she rarely received from him. He wrote that the dinner the night before had made him think deeply. He admitted that for many years he hadn't realized how abandoned Bryn had felt. He said he hoped he would have a chance to repair their relationship, even though he knew it would take time. Bryn read the message several times. She didn't reply immediately, not because she wanted to ignore him, but because she wanted to think carefully before responding. Over the years, she had learned that words spoken in emotional moments could easily lead to misunderstandings. A few hours later, her mother sent a message too. But the tone was different. Her mother said she felt hurt that Bryn had brought up old issues in front of the entire family. In her view, those matters should have been discussed privately instead of making everyone feel embarrassed. Still, at the end of the message, she added that she hoped the two of them could talk more in the future. The contrast between the two messages made Bryn realize that each person in her family was reacting to the truth in their own way. Her father seemed to be reflecting on things more seriously. Her mother, meanwhile, was still trying to defend her perspective, even though her tone had softened slightly. Kendra contacted her last. 2 days after the dinner, she finally sent a long message. In it, she admitted the evening had left her confused. She said she had never realized that past events had hurt Bryn so deeply. Kendra also acknowledged that she might have unintentionally received more attention from their parents without ever thinking about how that might have affected her younger sister. Reading the message, Bryn felt a small sense of relief. For years, she had believed Kendra had been completely unaware of the favoritism, but maybe the truth was more complicated. Perhaps Kendra had simply grown used to how things worked in their family and had never stopped to question it. In the weeks that followed, Bryn stayed in contact with her family but cautiously. She didn't return home immediately, and she didn't attend large family gatherings. Instead, she started with small steps: short phone calls with her father, simple text exchanges with Kendra, and occasional conversations with her mother. Those conversations were not always easy. Sometimes, when the past came up, the tension would return. But unlike before, Bryn no longer stayed silent. She expressed her thoughts clearly, and she asked her family to listen instead of dismissing her feelings. Gradually, Bryn began to notice small changes in how her family treated her. Her father started asking more about her work and the projects she was leading. Kendra shared more about her own life and seemed less distant. Her mother, however, remained the most difficult to change. In many conversations, she still tried to explain that every decision in the past had been made with good intentions. But over time, she slowly began to admit that she might not have fully understood how deeply those decisions had affected Bryn. About a month after the dinner, Bryn's father suggested a small meeting at a cafe. He said he wanted to talk to her alone, without anyone else from the family there. Bryn agreed. The meeting was simple but sincere. Her father admitted that for many years he had always thought of Bryn as the strongest and most independent person in the family. Because of that belief, he had unintentionally given her less attention. He assumed she didn't need as much support as Kendra. Bryn listened quietly before responding. She explained that being strong didn't mean she didn't need love from her family. For many years, she had simply learned to rely on herself because she felt she had no other choice. That conversation didn't solve everything, but it helped them understand each other better. When the meeting ended, Bryn felt that her relationship with her father could slowly be rebuilt even though it would take time. Meanwhile, Bryn's life continued to move forward. Her work became increasingly busy, with new projects and larger opportunities appearing in her career. She still lived in the penthouse overlooking the vast city skyline, but her feelings about that home had changed. Before, the penthouse had symbolized independence and the distance between her and her family. Now, it had also become a place where she could reflect, heal, and calmly decide the direction of her future. One evening, while sitting on the balcony and looking down at the glowing city below, Bryn realized that her success was no longer connected to proving anything to her family. For many years, she had worked hard partly because she wanted their recognition. But now she understood that her worth didn't depend on that. What mattered most to her now was peace of mind and relationships built on genuine respect. Bryn didn't know exactly how her relationship with her family would develop in the future. Perhaps they would gradually grow closer, or perhaps they would simply maintain a respectful distance. But for the first time in years, she no longer felt the pressure to force everything to become perfect. She accepted that the past could not be changed, but the future could still be shaped in many different ways. And when she looked back at the path she had walked from the girl who stood alone at her graduation ceremony to the confident and successful woman she had become, Bryn understood something important. What mattered most was not what her family had or had not done for her. What mattered was that she had never allowed those things to define who she was. She had built her own life. And whether her family remained a part of that life or not, she would continue moving forward with the confidence and self-respect she had spent years building. In the months following the tense evening at the restaurant, Bryn's life gradually returned to its normal rhythm. She continued working hard, taking part in important projects at her company, and maintaining her familiar routine. But one thing had clearly changed: the way she viewed her family, herself, and her relationships. For many years, Bryn had carried a difficult feeling she couldn't fully explain. Even though she had achieved success in both her studies and career, there had always been a sense of emptiness inside her. It came from a deep desire to be recognized and appreciated by her family. But after the honest conversation with her parents and sister, she began to understand something important. Sometimes, continuing to seek approval from people who aren't ready to change only leads to more exhaustion. That realization didn't mean Bryn completely cut off her family. Instead, she maintained contact with them in a different way. Rather than trying to please everyone or hiding her true feelings, she began setting clear boundaries. For example, when the family suggested organizing a large gathering during a holiday, Bryn no longer felt obligated to attend if her work schedule was too busy. In the past, she would have tried to rearrange everything to avoid disappointing anyone. But now she understood that respecting her own time and emotions was just as important as maintaining family relationships. Bryn's father was the one who seemed to change the most after their conversation. He began reaching out to her more often. Sometimes it was just a simple message asking about her work or sharing a small story from his day. These gestures might have seemed small, but to Bryn, they meant a great deal. For the first time in many years, she felt that her father was truly trying to rebuild their relationship. The relationship between Bryn and Kendra also slowly became more open. After realizing what Bryn had gone through, Kendra began reflecting on many past events with a different perspective. During one phone conversation, she admitted that for a long time she had grown used to their parents prioritizing her and had never really thought about how that might affect her younger sister. That admission didn't erase the past completely, but it helped Bryn feel that her sister was finally beginning to understand. Bryn's mother remained the slowest to change. In many conversations, she still tried to explain or justify the decisions she had made in the past. But over time, she began to listen more often instead of immediately dismissing Bryn's feelings. One time, during a long phone conversation, Bryn's mother finally said something that surprised her. She admitted that when Bryn was young, she had always seemed unusually independent and mature for her age. Because of that, she had unconsciously believed that Bryn didn't need as much attention as Kendra. Hearing this, Bryn didn't feel angry the way she once might have. Instead, she gently explained that sometimes the children who appear the strongest are the ones who most need to be heard. Conversations like that were not always easy, but they slowly helped the two of them understand each other better. While her relationship with her family was gradually changing, Bryn also spent more time reflecting on her own journey. When she looked back on the past, she realized that the pain of being abandoned on her graduation day had become a major turning point in her life. If her parents had shown up that day and everything had gone perfectly, her life might still have turned out well. But perhaps she would not have become as strong and independent as she was now. That experience had forced her to trust herself, build her own life, and stop depending on other people's approval. One evening, while Bryn was having dinner with a few close friends, the topic of family came up unexpectedly. One of her friends asked whether she regretted confronting her family so directly. Bryn thought for a moment before answering. She said that in the past, she had been afraid to speak the truth because she worried it might completely destroy her relationship with her family. But after many years of silence, she realized that a relationship built on avoidance and suppressed emotions was not truly healthy either. Speaking honestly might make people uncomfortable at first, but at least it created the possibility for change. For Bryn, the most important lesson she learned from the entire experience was the value of respect, not just respect from others, but respect for herself. For many years, she had tried to be the easy child, the one who stayed quiet and handled everything on her own. But now she understood that speaking up when she felt treated unfairly was not selfish. It was part of protecting her own self-worth. Sometimes, when she stood on the balcony of her penthouse and looked out over the city, Bryn thought about the young woman who had once stood alone at her graduation ceremony years earlier. Back then, she had felt lonely and abandoned. But now, when she remembered that moment, it no longer brought the same pain. Instead, she felt grateful, because that experience had helped shape the person she had become. Bryn's life continued to move forward with new challenges and opportunities. She didn't know exactly what the future would bring for her relationship with her family, but she no longer worried about it. Because in the end, what mattered most was not whether everyone in the family was perfect. What mattered was that Bryn had learned how to live with confidence, self-respect, and the ability to forgive, not to erase the past, but to move forward without being controlled by it. Time continued to pass after the emotional conversations between Bryn and her family. Things did not change overnight, but small steps slowly began to appear. For Bryn, the important thing was not that everything became perfect, but that the members of her family had at least started to recognize what had happened in the past. For many years, Bryn had felt as though she needed to prove her worth. Every achievement and every step forward in her career felt like evidence that she deserved to be acknowledged. But after confronting her family and finally expressing the feelings she had kept inside for so long, she realized something important. The most meaningful recognition did not come from others, it came from herself. One of the biggest changes in Bryn's life was how she began to understand forgiveness. In the past, whenever she thought about forgiving her parents, it felt like she would be accepting that what they had done was right. But over time, she realized that forgiveness was not about forgetting the pain or pretending it never happened. Forgiveness was a way of freeing herself from anger that had lasted too long. Bryn didn't forgive immediately. It was a slow and sometimes complicated process. Some days she felt she had completely moved on, while on other days old memories returned and made her feel sad again. But instead of trying to push those feelings away, she learned to accept them as a natural part of growing. One weekend afternoon, Bryn received an invitation from her parents to have a small family dinner at their house. This time, it wasn't a large celebration or a special occasion, just a simple meal together. After thinking about it for a while, Bryn decided to go. When she stepped into the house where she had grown up, many memories came rushing back. Everything seemed almost the same as before. The family photos hanging on the walls, the familiar dining table, the smell of food drifting from the kitchen. Yet at the same time, she could clearly feel that she herself had changed. During dinner, no one directly mentioned the tense argument that had happened earlier at the restaurant, but the changes showed up in small ways. Her father asked for her opinion about some plans to renovate the house. Her mother listened carefully when Bryn talked about a new project at work instead of quickly changing the subject. And Kendra shared more openly about her own life than she had in the past. Those simple moments made Bryn realize that sometimes change does not come from grand apologies, but from small actions repeated over time. After dinner, while everyone was cleaning up, Bryn's mother suddenly said something that made the room fall silent. She said that she had thought a lot about the things Bryn had said before. And although she could not go back to the past to change everything, she hoped that in the future she could become a better mother to her. It was not a perfect apology, but for Bryn, it was sincere enough. She did not respond with a long speech or with accusations. She simply smiled and said that the most important thing was that everyone was trying. When she left the house that evening, Bryn felt a sense of peace she had never experienced before. Not because every problem had been completely solved, but because she was no longer carrying the same emotional burden as before. While driving back to the city, she thought about her journey over the past many years, from the young girl who felt abandoned at her graduation ceremony to the mature woman who could face her family and speak the truth calmly. The road had not been easy. It was filled with moments of doubt, sleepless nights, and complicated emotions. But those experiences had helped her understand herself more clearly. One thing Bryn realized was that every family has its mistakes and shortcomings. No family is perfect, but what makes the difference is the ability to learn from the past and try to change in the future. In Bryn's case, it took many years for her family to recognize the things they had overlooked, but at least they still had the opportunity to repair some of what had happened. In the months that followed, the relationship between Bryn and her family continued to grow slowly but steadily. There were no more unrealistic expectations or pressure to become a perfect family. Instead, there was mutual respect and the understanding that everyone had their own perspectives. Bryn also continued to focus on her own life. Her career kept progressing, and she began thinking about other long-term goals beyond work. She wanted to spend more time on herself, with friends, and on new experiences in life. One evening, while standing on the balcony of her penthouse and looking down at the city, Bryn remembered the day she posted the first photo of that apartment on social media. At the time, she had no idea that the photo would lead to a series of events that helped her and her family confront the past. If that photo had not existed, everything might have continued as before: superficial conversations, unspoken distance, and suppressed emotions. But sometimes, a single, small moment can change the entire direction of a story. Bryn no longer looked at the past with anger. Instead, she saw it as part of the journey that helped shape who she had become. She understood that her value did not depend on whether her parents attended her graduation ceremony. That value came from her persistence, her self-respect, and her ability to stand up again after disappointment. And the most important thing Bryn learned was that everyone has the right to decide the story of their own life. Family can influence us, and experiences from the past can leave deep marks. But in the end, how we respond to those experiences is what truly shapes who we become. When Bryn looked toward the future, she no longer saw herself as the girl who had been abandoned on an important day. She saw herself as a woman who had learned how to turn pain into strength and transform difficulties into motivation for growth. And with peace in her mind, she knew that the next chapter of her life would be written by her own choices, not by the mistakes of the past, but by hope and confidence in the future. After everything that had happened over many years, Bryn gradually realized that her story was not simply about a missed graduation ceremony. It was a story about fairness within a family, about how decisions that seemed small at the time could deeply affect someone's feelings for many years. When she was young, Bryn had always believed that family was a place where everyone was loved and treated fairly, but her reality had been different. For many years, she watched her parents devote most of their attention and energy to her sister, Kendra. Although Bryn was still cared for and not completely neglected, the difference in treatment was always there. What hurt Bryn the most was not that Kendra received more attention. What hurt her was the feeling that her own efforts were often not valued. Even when she achieved high grades, earned scholarships, or won awards, her family's reaction was usually just a few brief words of praise. In contrast, when Kendra had an important event, whether it was a birthday, a party, or an engagement celebration, the entire family focused all their attention on her. For many years, Bryn tried to convince herself that it didn't matter. She told herself that her success was enough and that she did not need recognition from her family. But deep inside, she still wanted to be seen and appreciated like any other child. That is why her graduation day became a major turning point in her life. It was not just a simple ceremony, it was the result of many years of effort. When her parents did not appear, Bryn felt as if all her hard work had been overlooked. However, what is remarkable about Bryn's story is how she responded to that disappointment. Instead of letting the pain break her, she used it as motivation to move forward. In the years that followed, Bryn focused on building her future. She studied diligently, worked tirelessly, and gradually built a solid career. The success she achieved did not come from luck, but from persistence and determination. But when she looked back, Bryn understood that material success or career achievements were not the most important things she had gained. The most valuable outcome was the growth in her mindset and emotions. She learned that everyone has the right to set boundaries in relationships, even with family. In many cultures, people often believe that family must always come first, no matter what happens. But Bryn realized that a relationship is truly healthy only when it is built on mutual respect. If someone is constantly overlooked or hurt in a relationship, speaking up and protecting themselves is not selfish. Another lesson Bryn learned from her experience was the importance of communication. For many years, she remained silent because she was afraid of making her family uncomfortable. But that silence only created a greater distance between her and her parents. When she finally decided to express her feelings during that evening at the restaurant, it was a difficult but necessary moment. That conversation did not immediately solve every problem, but it opened the door for her family to begin reconsidering the past. For Bryn's parents, this story was also an important lesson. Many parents unintentionally give more attention to the child they believe needs more help. Meanwhile, the child who appears independent and strong is often overlooked because they are assumed not to need as much support. But as Bryn told her parents, a child appearing strong does not mean they do not need love and recognition. Bryn's story also reminds us that important moments in a person's life, such as graduations, major achievements, or personal milestones, can carry far deeper meaning than others might realize. For Bryn, her parents not attending her graduation was not simply an absence. It symbolized many years of feeling like she stood in second place within the family. Yet what makes this story powerful is not the pain itself, but how Bryn overcame it. She did not allow the past to define her entire life. Instead, she used the experience to become stronger and to build a life she could be proud of. Over time, the relationship between Bryn and her family gradually improved. Though it was not perfect, it became more sincere. Family members began listening to one another more and trying to avoid repeating old mistakes. Bryn understood that real change takes time. But she also knew that speaking the truth and establishing boundaries had helped her find peace of mind. When she looked toward the future, Bryn no longer felt bound by the painful memories of the past. She continued living her life with confidence and gratitude for the lessons that life had given her. She also hoped that her story might help others who were experiencing similar situations understand that they are not alone. Sometimes, wounds from family can run very deep, but that does not mean we must carry that pain for the rest of our lives. With courage, honesty, and self-respect, everyone can find their own path toward healing and moving forward. And for Bryn, that journey led her to a place where she no longer needed to prove her worth to anyone. She had built her life through her own effort, belief, and perseverance, and that was her greatest success. When she looked back at her entire journey, Bryn understood that her story was not only about a missed graduation ceremony or the years she felt overlooked within her family. What mattered more was how she faced those experiences and transformed them into motivation for growth. In life, not everyone has a perfect family. Many people grow up in situations where they feel they are not treated fairly or not truly understood. This can leave emotional wounds that last for many years. But Bryn's story shows that those difficult experiences do not necessarily have to determine a person's entire future. At first, Bryn was like many others. She felt hurt, disappointed, and at times even questioned her own worth. When her parents did not appear on her graduation day, one of the most important milestones of her life, the feeling of abandonment became very clear. For a young person, that could easily shake their trust in their own family. However, instead of allowing that pain to stop her, Bryn chose a different path. She focused on developing herself and building an independent life. In the years that followed, even while facing many challenges, she continued to pursue her goals with determination. The success Bryn later achieved, from a stable career to owning her penthouse, was not only a symbol of material achievement, it also represented the inner strength she had built throughout her journey of growing up. They began to look back at how they had treated one another within the family. One of the biggest messages in this story is the importance of fairness and attention within a family. When parents unintentionally prioritize one child over another, it can create complicated emotions that last for many years. However, the story also shows that any relationship has the ability to change if the people involved are willing to listen and learn from the past. For Bryn, that process not only helped improve her relationship with her family but also helped her understand herself more clearly. She learned that a person's value does not depend on how others recognize them. Confidence and self-respect must come from within. When standing on the balcony of her penthouse and looking down at the vast city, Bryn often thought about the path she had taken. From a young woman who felt abandoned on her graduation day to an adult who had built her own life, her journey had been long, full of challenges, but also something she could be proud of. She understood that what had happened in the past could not be changed. But the way she responded to those experiences helped shape the person she had become. Another thing Bryn realized was that sometimes forgiveness is not about making someone else feel relieved, it is about freeing yourself. When she let go of anger and disappointment, she was able to focus on the present and the future instead of being trapped in painful memories. Bryn's life continued with many new goals and dreams. She kept working hard in her career, spending time with friends, and exploring the things that brought her happiness. Her relationship with her family also gradually became more stable, even if it was not perfect. But for Bryn, that was enough. Her story does not end with a perfect fairy tale ending. Instead, it ends with a deeper understanding of herself and of the relationships in her life. And in the end, the most important thing Bryn learned was this: everyone has the right to write their own life story. The past may influence us, but it does not have to determine our future. Our choices, persistence, and self-respect are what truly shape the path we take. After everything that had happened in her life, Bryn gradually realized that her story was not only a personal experience, it reflected an issue that many families around the world have faced: unconscious favoritism between children and the long-lasting emotional effects it can create. In many families, parents do not realize that they are treating their children differently. Sometimes those differences come from reasons that seem understandable. One child may struggle more, need more support, or simply have a personality that attracts more attention from parents. Meanwhile, another child may be more independent, cause fewer problems, and appear capable of taking care of themselves. But this difference can sometimes create an emotional distance that parents do not notice. The strong child is often expected to handle everything alone, while their emotional needs are quietly overlooked. Bryn was a clear example of this situation. When she was young, she always tried to study hard, achieve high results, and avoid causing trouble for her family. From her parents' perspective, this made them believe that Bryn was doing fine and did not need much attention. In contrast, Kendra, Bryn's sister, often faced more difficulties in life. Because of that, their parents spent more time and energy supporting her. Gradually, this became a pattern in the family. Kendra's problems always came first. What is important to notice is that no one in the family truly intended to hurt Bryn. Yet unconscious favoritism still existed and built up over many years. Bryn's graduation day was simply the moment when all those suppressed emotions finally surfaced. When her parents chose to attend Kendra's party instead of her graduation ceremony, it felt like a final confirmation that she had always been in second place within the family. Experiences like this are not uncommon. Many people grow up feeling that they must work harder to be noticed or recognized. Some carry that feeling with them throughout their lives, affecting their confidence and the way they build relationships later on. However, Bryn's story also shows that difficult experiences do not have to become limits for the future. One of Bryn's greatest strengths was her ability to turn pain into motivation. Instead of allowing disappointment to make her lose faith in herself, she focused on developing her career and building an independent life. The years after her graduation were full of challenges. Bryn had to work hard, learn to solve problems on her own, and sometimes face feelings of loneliness. But those experiences ultimately helped her become stronger. When she finally achieved stability and success in life, she no longer depended on recognition from her family to feel that she had value. Another important aspect of Bryn's story is the power of honest communication. For many years, she remained silent because she was afraid of hurting her family. But that silence only allowed negative emotions to build up over time. When Bryn finally decided to speak the truth during the evening meeting at the restaurant, it was an act that required great courage. Not everyone is willing to face their family and share such painful emotions. That conversation not only helped Bryn release her feelings but also forced the other members of the family to reflect on their actions. For Bryn's parents, this became an important moment of realization. They began to understand that the decisions they once considered normal may have deeply affected their daughter. This shows that many family conflicts do not come from bad intentions, but from a lack of awareness. When people are willing to listen and see things from each other's perspectives, change becomes possible. Bryn's story also highlights the importance of setting boundaries in relationships. In the past, she often accepted everything because she did not want to create conflict. But as she grew older, she realized that protecting her emotions and values was necessary. Setting boundaries does not mean abandoning family. Instead, it helps create a healthier relationship where everyone respects each other's feelings and needs. Another important lesson from this story is the concept of forgiveness. Forgiveness does not mean denying what happened or pretending everything is fine. It is the process of accepting the past and deciding not to let it continue controlling your emotions. For Bryn, forgiving her family did not happen in a single moment. It was a long process, sometimes filled with conflicting feelings. But over time, she realized that letting go of anger helped her feel lighter and freer. Today, when she looks back at her life, Bryn no longer focuses on what her family did wrong. Instead, she focuses on what she learned from those experiences. She learned how to trust herself, how to communicate honestly, and how to build relationships based on respect. More importantly, she understands that everyone has the right to define their own value, no matter what they have experienced in the past. Bryn's story may not be a fairy tale with a perfect ending, but that is exactly what makes it meaningful and realistic. It shows that life is not always fair, but we still have the ability to create our own path. For people who have ever felt overlooked or unrecognized within their families, this story carries an important message. The past may leave marks, but it does not define who we are. Persistence, self-respect, and the courage to face the truth are the things that truly shape our future. For Bryn, that journey helped her become a strong and confident woman. When the entire story comes to a close, what Bryn realizes most clearly is that her greatest achievement is not her career success or owning a luxurious penthouse in the city. Those are certainly accomplishments she can be proud of, but they are not the most meaningful part of her journey. What matters most is the emotional growth she experienced and the way she learned to heal the wounds of the past. For many years earlier in her life, Bryn carried the feeling that she always had to try harder to be recognized. When a child grows up feeling that their achievements are not properly acknowledged, it can affect how they see their own worth. Bryn experienced that stage as well. She often wondered whether she truly mattered in her family's eyes. She tried to earn higher grades, work harder, and become more independent, hoping that one day her parents would notice her efforts. But over time, Bryn realized that constantly trying to earn recognition from others can become an endless cycle. If someone depends entirely on external validation to feel valuable, they will easily feel disappointed when that recognition does not come. The biggest lesson Bryn learned was that a person's value should not depend entirely on how others perceive them. When she began focusing on personal growth and building her own life, she gradually understood that true confidence comes from within. It comes from knowing that you have done your best and that you are living according to your own values and goals. An important turning point in Bryn's story was the moment she decided to face her family and speak about the emotions she had suppressed for many years. This decision was not easy. Many people in similar situations choose to remain silent to avoid conflict. They fear that telling the truth might hurt family members or damage existing relationships. But Bryn realized that prolonged silence can also cause harm in another way. When emotions are suppressed for too long, they can turn into resentment and create growing distance between family members. By sharing her thoughts, Bryn created an opportunity for everyone to understand each other better. At first, the conversation was tense and difficult, but that honesty opened a new path for change. Bryn's story also shows that change in relationships rarely happens instantly. After their first conversation, her family needed time to reflect and adjust their perspectives. Small changes gradually appeared. Her father began showing more interest in her life. Kendra tried to understand her sister's feelings, and her mother started listening more carefully. Although these changes were not perfect, they showed that people can learn and grow if they are willing to acknowledge their mistakes. Another important part of Bryn's journey was forgiveness. Forgiveness does not mean forgetting what happened or pretending everything is fine. Instead, it means accepting the past and choosing not to let it control your life anymore. For Bryn, forgiveness helped her release the emotional weight she had carried for many years. Once she was no longer dominated by anger or disappointment, she could focus on more positive aspects of life. An interesting part of Bryn's story is how a small moment, the photo she posted on social media, led to the entire chain of events that followed. Without that picture of her penthouse, her family might never have reached out again, and that important conversation might never have taken place. This shows that sometimes major changes in life begin with very small and unexpected moments. When Bryn looks back at her journey now, she no longer feels pain when remembering her graduation day. Instead, she sees it as an important turning point that pushed her to grow. If that day had been perfect, she might still have become successful, but she might not have learned such deep lessons about independence, self-respect, and inner strength. Today, Bryn lives with a sense of peace that she never had before. She continues developing her career, building healthy relationships, and spending time on the things that make her happy. Her relationship with her family has also become more stable. It may not look exactly like the family she once imagined as a child, but it is more sincere and built on greater understanding. Most importantly, Bryn no longer seeks validation from her family in order to feel valuable. She has learned to trust herself and feel proud of the person she has become. Bryn's story does not end with a fairy tale ending, but with deep personal growth. It shows that life is not always fair, yet everyone has the ability to overcome difficulties and create their own future. For Bryn, her greatest success is not the penthouse or her stable career. Her greatest success is that she learned how to value herself, forgive the past, and move forward with a lighter heart. After everything that changed her life, Bryn gradually realized that true maturity does not only come from age or professional success. It comes from how a person faces the wounds of the past and learns to move forward without letting them become lifelong burdens. For many years before, Bryn believed that success would solve everything. She thought that if she worked hard enough, achieved great accomplishments, and proved her abilities, her family would eventually see her differently. But once she had achieved many things in life, she realized that success does not always bring the recognition she once hoped for. At first, this truth made Bryn feel disappointed. But over time, she understood that her value should never depend on the recognition of anyone else, even her own family. This realization is important for many adults. When we are young, we often seek approval from our parents in order to feel meaningful. But as we grow older, each person must learn how to build their own sense of self-worth. For Bryn, that journey was not easy. It required her to revisit old memories, accept that some things in the past could not be changed, and learn to let go of unrealistic expectations. One thing that helped Bryn grow was beginning to see her parents from a different perspective. When she was younger, she believed that parents should always know the right thing to do. But as she matured, she realized that parents are also just ordinary people with their own limitations and mistakes. Bryn's parents may have loved her, but they did not always understand her feelings. They were also influenced by circumstances, life pressures, and their own beliefs about how children should be raised. Realizing this did not make Bryn excuse everything they had done in the past, but it helped her see the situation with more calmness and empathy. In many conversations afterward, Bryn gradually realized that her parents were also learning from their mistakes. They could not go back to the day of her graduation to change their decision, but they could try to build a better relationship with her in the present. For Bryn, accepting those efforts became an important step in her healing process. Another thing Bryn learned was the importance of living for herself. In the past, many of her decisions had been influenced by her desire to gain recognition from her family, but now she began thinking more about the things that truly made her happy. She spent time on hobbies she had never had the chance to explore before. She traveled more, met new friends, and experienced things that made life richer and more meaningful. Those experiences helped Bryn realize that life is not only about work or achievements, it is also about small but meaningful moments, like an evening conversation with friends, a spontaneous trip, or simply quiet time to reflect on herself. Meanwhile, her relationship with her family continued to grow in a new way. There were no longer unrealistic expectations or pressure to be a perfect family. Instead, there were honest conversations and mutual respect. Bryn and Kendra also gradually became closer over time. In the past, there had always been a difficult-to-explain distance between the two sisters. But after they both began sharing their feelings more openly, they realized that each of them had faced struggles the other had never fully understood. Kendra also admitted that for many years she had not realized that she had received more attention from their parents. When she looked back at the past, she began to understand why Bryn had felt so hurt. Conversations like these helped the two sisters rebuild their relationship in a more mature way. For Bryn, what mattered most was not that everything became perfect, but that she no longer felt like she had to compete for attention within the family. She had found peace in accepting herself and building her life in her own way. One evening, while standing on the balcony of her penthouse and looking down at the city, Bryn remembered the image of herself many years earlier, the young woman standing alone at her graduation ceremony, trying to smile even though she was full of disappointment inside. If she could go back to that moment, she would tell that young woman that life would not stop at that painful moment. In fact, that moment would become the beginning of an important journey of growth. Bryn understood that everyone faces difficult experiences in life. But those experiences are not the end of the story. They can become lessons that help us understand ourselves and what truly matters. Today, when she looks toward the future, Bryn no longer feels bound by the past. She continues building her career, developing relationships, and searching for new opportunities in life. She also carries the lessons she has learned, the value of honesty, the strength of forgiveness, and the importance of self-respect. And above all, Bryn understands that life is not about proving our worth to others. Life is a journey of discovering ourselves, learning from mistakes, and creating a future we can be proud of. That is the true maturity Bryn achieved after everything she went through. After everything that happened, what Bryn realized was not a sense of victory over her family, nor a feeling of revenge when her mother was finally forced to face the truth. The most important thing was that she had learned how to reassess her own value. For many years before, Bryn had always tried to be the understanding child, the one who quietly stood in the background so the family could focus on her sister, Kendra. She believed that if she tried hard enough, if she were patient enough, and forgiving enough, one day her parents would recognize her efforts. But as time passed, Bryn gradually realized that recognition from others does not always come, especially from people who have grown accustomed to seeing her sacrifices as something natural. That graduation night became the first major turning point in Bryn's life. It was the moment she realized she had expected too much from people who were not truly ready to give her the attention she deserved. When she looked down at the audience and saw that her parents' seats were still empty, she felt a deep pain. Not because they were busy, but because they had actively chosen another event, Kendra's engagement party, over being present at the most important moment of her 4 years in college. From that moment, Bryn began to understand that if she continued living only to seek recognition from her family, she would remain disappointed forever. In the years that followed, Bryn chose a different path. She focused on her work, built her career, and gradually created the life she wanted. This path was not easy. She worked night shifts, saved every dollar, and had to overcome many challenges on her own. But those hardships made her stronger. Instead of waiting for support from her family, Bryn learned how to stand firmly on her own 2 feet. When Bryn finally achieved success and began living a stable life, something unexpected happened. Her family started coming back into her life. This change made Bryn realize a painful truth. For many years, when she had been struggling and trying to build her life from nothing, her family had shown little interest in her. But once she became successful, once they saw the photos of her penthouse on social media, their attitude changed noticeably. They began calling her, asking to meet, and expressing how proud they were of her. That realization was difficult for Bryn. It made her understand that sometimes recognition from others does not come from unconditional love, but from what people see on the surface. Even so, Bryn did not respond with anger or revenge. Instead, she chose honesty. The envelope she brought to the family dinner was not meant to hurt her mother. It was meant to force everyone to face what had happened in the past. For years, the story of her graduation had been forgotten or brushed aside. But for Bryn, it had always remained a wound that never fully healed. Once the truth was placed on the table, her family could no longer pretend that everything had been fine. That moment did not create a perfect ending. There was no dramatic scene where everyone cried and instantly resolved every conflict. In reality, many relationships within Bryn's family still had distance. But the difference now was that Bryn no longer felt trapped by old expectations. She had said what she needed to say and had set clear boundaries for her life. Over time, some relationships within the family slowly began to change. Her father started calling her more often. At first, their conversations were a little awkward, but they showed that he was trying to rebuild a connection with his daughter. Bryn understood that real change cannot happen overnight, but as long as there was effort, things could still move forward. In her present life, Bryn had created a world of her own, a world where she was valued for who she truly was. She had a home she bought with her own money, a stable career, and a partner who always respected her feelings. None of these things were rewards given by her family. They were the result of the effort she had made on her own. Bryn also realized that forgiveness does not mean forgetting everything. Sometimes forgiveness simply means accepting that the past happened and choosing not to let it control your life anymore. She no longer tried to prove her worth to her family. Instead, she focused on living a life that made her proud of herself. One small but meaningful symbol in Bryn's life was the graduation diploma hanging in her office. Every time she looked at it, she remembered the long road she had traveled, the exhausting nights of work, the moments when she felt alone, and the graduation day her parents never attended. But instead of feeling sadness, Bryn saw it as a reminder of her own strength. She had overcome all of it and continued moving forward. In the end, Bryn understood that a person's identity and value are not determined by family, society, or anyone else. Every individual has the right to define themselves and choose their own path. For Bryn, this journey was not simply a story about success or failure. It was a story about finding her own voice again. And when she looked back on that entire journey, Bryn realized something important. She no longer needed to wait for someone else to give her recognition. Because in the end, the only person who truly has the power to determine her value is herself. After everything that had happened in her life, Bryn slowly came to understand that her story was more than just a painful memory about her family. It had become a journey of growth, a journey where she learned important lessons about love, self-respect, and how a person can stand up again after deep emotional wounds. The past could not be changed, but the way she chose to understand and use those experiences was entirely within her control. For many years, Bryn often asked herself a question that many people who have been hurt by their families also ask. What did I do wrong? When she was younger, she believed that perhaps she was not good enough, not successful enough, or simply not worthy of making her parents proud. She saw the attention, praise, and care her parents gave to Kendra, and she unconsciously compared herself to her sister. Each time she did, Bryn felt as if something was missing inside her, something she could never quite explain. But as she grew older, she began to understand something important. Sometimes, the problem is not within ourselves. Some families unknowingly create favoritism. Some parents do not realize that their actions are hurting one of their children. In Bryn's case, her parents may never have realized how deeply missing her graduation ceremony would hurt her. To them, it might have seemed like a simple decision made on a busy day. But to Bryn, it was the moment she truly realized her place within the family. That realization helped Bryn change the way she looked at the past. Instead of continuing to blame herself or remain trapped in pain, she began to see those experiences as part of the journey that made her stronger. This did not mean the pain disappeared completely, but it helped her understand that she did not have to live forever as the girl who had been left behind. One of the biggest changes in Bryn's thinking was how she defined the idea of family. In the past, she believed family meant people connected by blood who must always stay together no matter what happened. But after years of experience, Bryn realized that real family is not defined only by blood. Family can also be the people who listen to you, respect you, and stand beside you during the most important moments of your life. In her current life, Bryn had created a new kind of family in a broader sense. It included the close friends who supported her during difficult years, the colleagues who believed in her work, and the partner who always respected her emotions. These relationships gave Bryn the sense of appreciation and belonging that she had once longed for. Bryn's story also helped her realize the importance of setting boundaries in relationships. In the past, she always tried to please everyone, especially her family. She was afraid that if she spoke honestly about her feelings, things would only become worse. But years of silence only allowed misunderstandings and emotional pain to grow deeper. When Bryn finally chose to speak the truth during the family dinner, it was not just an act of confronting the past. It was also a way of affirming that her feelings were just as important as anyone else's. That moment may have made the atmosphere tense, but it also created an opportunity for her family to begin reflecting on what had happened. Another important lesson Bryn learned from her experience was that success does not always bring complete healing. When she achieved success in her career and built a stable life, many people assumed that her past no longer mattered. But in reality, success is only one part of growing up. Emotional wounds require time, understanding, and sometimes difficult conversations in order to truly heal. However, Bryn's success still carried a special meaning. It proved that a person's starting circumstances do not fully determine their future. Even though she once felt forgotten within her own family, Bryn was still able to build a life she was proud of. This became a source of inspiration not only for herself, but also for people around her. Over time, Bryn also began to see her parents from a more mature perspective. She realized that they were simply ordinary people with their own mistakes and limitations. This understanding did not make their past actions right, but it helped Bryn see that family hurt does not always come from bad intentions. Sometimes it comes from a lack of awareness or long-standing habits within a family. This understanding helped Bryn find peace within herself. She no longer tried to change the past or waited for a perfect apology from her parents. Instead, she focused on building her present and future in the way she believed was right. In recent years, Bryn also began sharing her story with others. At first, she only told close friends. But later she realized that many people had experienced similar feelings, the feeling of being compared with siblings, the feeling of not receiving enough attention from parents, or the pressure of constantly having to prove one's worth. When people heard Bryn's story, they felt understood and realized they were not alone in experiencing those emotions. This helped Bryn realize that her personal experiences could become a source of strength for others. By sharing her story, she helped people who once felt overlooked understand that they could still build meaningful and happy lives. Ultimately, the greatest lesson Bryn learned from her entire journey was this: the past may shape who you are, but it does not have the right to decide your future. Pain, disappointment, and heartbreaking moments can leave deep marks, but they can also become the motivation that helps a person grow stronger. Bryn no longer saw the story of her graduation day as simply a sad memory. Instead, she saw it as a turning point, the moment that began her journey toward discovering her true self-worth. Without that experience, she might never have realized the strength she carried within herself. Looking back at the path she had walked, Bryn understood something important. Even though life is not always fair, everyone still has the right to choose how they move forward. For Bryn, that choice meant continuing to move ahead, living a life she could be proud of, and never allowing anyone, even the past, to determine her value. After many years of experiencing difficulties within her family, Bryn gradually realized that growing up is not only about achieving success in a career or building a stable life. True maturity also means being able to look back at the past calmly, accepting that some things cannot be changed, and learning to let go so life can become lighter. This lesson is not easy, especially for those who have been hurt by the people they love the most. For a long time, Bryn carried a question that never seemed to have a complete answer. Why did her parents choose Kendra's engagement party instead of her graduation ceremony? For many people, it might have been just an unfortunate coincidence. But for Bryn, that moment felt like confirmation that she was not the priority in her family. That feeling followed her for many years and shaped how she saw herself and how she built relationships with others. When she was younger, Bryn believed that if she tried harder, if she achieved more success, perhaps her parents would start paying more attention to her. That belief pushed her to study hard, work tirelessly, and constantly prove that she deserved recognition. To some extent, that determination helped Bryn achieve impressive success in life, but she also realized that living only to seek approval from others can eventually leave a person exhausted. There was a period when Bryn focused almost entirely on her work. She spent most of her time on her career, new projects, and building an independent life. From the outside, many people saw a strong, successful, and confident woman. But inside, there were still unresolved emotions. Memories about her family sometimes made her feel sad or disappointed. During those moments, Bryn began to understand something important. Healing does not mean trying to forget the past. Instead, it means accepting that the past happened and learning how to move forward without allowing those painful memories to continue controlling your emotions. This process requires patience and deep self-awareness. One important step in that journey was when Bryn learned to forgive, not to justify what had happened, but to free herself from the burden of resentment. Forgiveness did not mean she had to forget that her parents missed her graduation ceremony. It also did not mean pretending everything was fine. It simply meant she decided that the past would no longer control her present life. When Bryn began seeing things this way, her mind felt lighter. She stopped spending so much time wondering what might have been different. Instead, she focused on the present, on positive relationships, new opportunities, and experiences that made her happy. Another noticeable change in Bryn's life was how she built personal relationships. In the past, because she feared being hurt, she often kept people at a distance. She worried that if she trusted someone too much, they might eventually disappoint her the way her family once had. But over time, Bryn realized that closing her heart also meant losing the chance to experience genuine connections. So she began allowing herself to open up more. She spent time with people who truly cared about her and built relationships based on respect and understanding. Her close friends, colleagues, and life partner became an important part of her life, people who gave her the sense of support and security that she had once lacked in her family. For Bryn, this helped her understand that everyone has the right to choose how they define family. Family is not only about blood. Family can also be the people who come into your life and choose to stand beside you during the moments that matter most. Over time, Bryn's relationship with her parents slowly changed, though not in a perfect way. There were difficult conversations, moments of silence, and sometimes awkward attempts from her parents to repair the mistakes of the past. Bryn understood that real change takes time. No one can turn back time to correct decisions made many years ago. What mattered most was that she no longer placed her entire happiness on whether her family would change. She accepted that some parts of life will always carry a little regret, and that is completely normal. One thing Bryn felt especially proud of was that she had learned to treat herself with kindness. In the past, she had been very hard on herself. Whenever she made a mistake, she blamed herself for a long time. But after everything she had experienced, Bryn realized that everyone deserves compassion, even from themselves. She began spending time on things that brought her peace, reading books, traveling, meeting friends, or simply enjoying a quiet afternoon in her own home. These small moments helped her understand that happiness does not always come from major achievements. Sometimes, it is simply the feeling of being content with the life you have built. Bryn's story also helped her realize the importance of setting boundaries in relationships. In the past, she always tried to please everyone, especially her family. She was afraid that if she spoke honestly about her feelings, things would only become worse. But years of silence only allowed misunderstandings and emotional pain to grow deeper. When Bryn finally chose to speak the truth during the family dinner, it was not just an act of confronting the past, it was also a way of affirming that her feelings were just as important as anyone else's. That moment may have made the atmosphere tense, but it also created an opportunity for her family to begin reflecting on what had happened. Another important lesson Bryn learned from her experience was that success does not always bring complete healing. When she achieved success in her career and built a stable life, many people assumed that her past no longer mattered. But in reality, success is only one part of growing up. Emotional wounds require time, understanding, and sometimes difficult conversations in order to truly heal. However, Bryn's success still carried a special meaning. It proved that a person's starting circumstances do not fully determine their future. Even though she once felt forgotten within her own family, Bryn was still able to build a life she was proud of. This became a source of inspiration not only for herself but also for people around her. Over time, Bryn also began to see her parents from a more mature perspective. She realized that they were simply ordinary people with their own mistakes and limitations. This understanding did not make their past actions right, but it helped Bryn see that family hurt does not always come from bad intentions. Sometimes it comes from a lack of awareness or long-standing habits within a family. This understanding helped Bryn find peace within herself. She no longer tried to change the past or waited for a perfect apology from her parents. Instead, she focused on building her present and future in the way she believed was right. In recent years, Bryn also began sharing her story with others. At first, she only told close friends. But later she realized that many people had experienced similar feelings. The feeling of being compared with siblings, the feeling of not receiving enough attention from parents, or the pressure of constantly having to prove one's worth. When people heard Bryn's story, they felt understood and realized they were not alone in experiencing those emotions. This helped Bryn realize that her personal experiences could become a source of strength for others. By sharing her story, she helped people who once felt overlooked understand that they could still build meaningful and happy lives. Ultimately, the greatest lesson Bryn learned from her entire journey was this: the past may shape who you are, but it does not have the right to decide your future. Pain, disappointment, and heartbreaking moments can leave deep marks, but they can also become the motivation that helps a person grow stronger. Bryn no longer saw the story of her graduation day as simply a sad memory. Instead, she saw it as a turning point, the moment that began her journey toward discovering her true self-worth. Without that experience, she might never have realized the strength she carried within herself. Looking back at the path she had walked, Bryn understood something important. Even though life is not always fair, everyone still has the right to choose how they move forward. For Bryn, that choice meant continuing to move ahead, living a life she could be proud of, and never allowing anyone, even the past, to determine her value. After many years of experiencing difficulties within her family, Bryn gradually realized that growing up is not only about achieving success in a career or building a stable life. True maturity also means being able to look back at the past calmly, accepting that some things cannot be changed, and learning to let go so life can become lighter. This lesson is not easy, especially for those who have been hurt by the people they love the most. For a long time, Bryn carried a question that never seemed to have a complete answer. Why did her parents choose Kendra's engagement party instead of her graduation ceremony? For many people, it might have been just an unfortunate coincidence. But for Bryn, that moment felt like confirmation that she was not the priority in her family. That feeling followed her for many years and shaped how she saw herself and how she built relationships with others. When she was younger, Bryn believed that if she tried harder, if she achieved more success, perhaps her parents would start paying more attention to her. That belief pushed her to study hard, work tirelessly, and constantly prove that she deserved recognition. To some extent, that determination helped Bryn achieve impressive success in life. But she also realized that living only to seek approval from others can eventually leave a person exhausted. There was a period when Bryn focused almost entirely on her work. She spent most of her time on her career, new projects, and building an independent life. From the outside, many people saw a strong, successful, and confident woman. But inside, there were still unresolved emotions. Memories about her family sometimes made her feel sad or disappointed. During those moments, Bryn began to understand something important. Healing does not mean trying to forget the past. Instead, it means accepting that the past happened and learning how to move forward without allowing those painful memories to continue controlling your emotions. This process requires patience and deep self-awareness. One important step in that journey was when Bryn learned to forgive, not to justify what had happened, but to free herself from the burden of resentment. Forgiveness did not mean she had to forget that her parents missed her graduation ceremony. It also did not mean pretending everything was fine. It simply meant she decided that the past would no longer control her present life. When Bryn began seeing things this way, her mind felt lighter. She stopped spending so much time wondering what might have been different. Instead, she focused on the present, on positive relationships, new opportunities, and experiences that made her happy. Another noticeable change in Bryn's life was how she built personal relationships. In the past, because she feared being hurt, she often kept people at a distance. She worried that if she trusted someone too much, they might eventually disappoint her the way her family once had. But over time, Bryn realized that closing her heart also meant losing the chance to experience genuine connections. So, she began allowing herself to open up more. She spent time with people who truly cared about her and built relationships based on respect and understanding. Her close friends, colleagues, and life partner became an important part of her life, people who gave her the sense of support and security that she had once lacked in her family. For Bryn, this helped her understand that everyone has the right to choose how they define family. Family is not only about blood. Family can also be the people who come into your life and choose to stand beside you during the moments that matter most. Over time, Bryn's relationship with her parents slowly changed, though not in a perfect way. There were difficult conversations, moments of silence, and sometimes awkward attempts from her parents to repair the mistakes of the past. Bryn understood that real change takes time. No one can turn back time to correct decisions made many years ago. What mattered most was that she no longer placed her entire happiness on whether her family would change. She accepted that some parts of life will always carry a little regret, and that is completely normal. One thing Bryn felt especially proud of was that she had learned to treat herself with kindness. In the past, she had been very hard on herself. Whenever she made a mistake, she blamed herself for a long time. But after everything she had experienced, Bryn realized that everyone deserves compassion, even from themselves. She began spending time on things that brought her peace, reading books, traveling, meeting friends, or simply enjoying a quiet afternoon in her own home. These small moments helped her understand that happiness does not always come from major achievements. Sometimes, it is simply the feeling of being content with the life you have built.